And hello, everybody. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. And since this show is airing just a few days before the election, I thought, and our major portion of our audience is in Oregon, I thought, man, this would be a great time to bring the only person I think who understands how to do news in Oregon anymore, Bill Lundun from KPNW, who also does our crazy Oregon news segment for us. He's going to come on in just a second, and we're going to just kind of run through some of the things going on there, talk a little bit about some of the wacky bills in Montana that are going on and races, and just get kind of a feel from Bill, because I get emails all the time from you guys going, have you covered 118? And it's like, yes, I did. We had a show on 118, and we've actually had about 4 or 5 shows from lawmakers in Salem on several of the issues. If you go on Spotify or any of our other channels, you can go back and look those up and find out if you're looking for more information. But our show is sponsored by, of course, Dr. Michael Bratlin for Dental Family Dentistry. Dr. Bratlin is a big supporter of everyone having a voice, and that's why he sponsors our show. Also, Greg Hinkle, a local guy here in Helena, but actually from Oregon and Washington. He's a mortgage lender, and he too is very open to people having a voice and conversation and being able to speak their mind. And then don't forget Matt McCarl, New Leaf Hyperbarics and Wellness Center, where I know Bill's a lucky man. He's like right down the hallway from Matt. So he can go in and so I got in a bike accident. I mean, Bill, we could talk about that. I got this bike accident. Matt goes, you need to come in and get in the hyperbaric chamber. Well, it's a little bit of a drive from Townsend, Montana, but they treat scars. He treats all kinds of stuff. I know Bill goes in there and gets some treatments. And I personally am a huge fan. I'm going to bring you in here, Bill. Hey, Bill. I'm a big fan of the light therapy. Oh God. He did that. I've done, I think that 3 or 4 times. And it's like, I get a little nice rush off of that. I'm not going to say a buzz, but I get a rush.
Yeah, well, there's different types of light therapy, and there's the one that is energizing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't like staying up all night, so because I have a weird schedule anyway. But I was actually over there yesterday and had hyperbaric treatment, so I do it frequently.
So, Bill, you're covering this all the time. What are the big I have some people I want to ask about, but what are the big issues that are on the ballot for Oregonians this time?
Well, there's a bunch of them. There's Measure 115, and that's a pretty straightforward. And Oregon is one of the few states that doesn't have a way of impeaching a statewide elected official.
Uh-huh.
And we found that out when John Kitzhaber was governor, and remember, he ended up quitting. And then it became a major issue when former Secretary of State Shemia Fagan, it was found out, had accepted a $9,000 a month job while Secretary of State to be a consultant. Look at me making air quotes.
That's great.
A consultant.
Bill, you need to bring him in just a little bit because you're vertical.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, she
that was like a marijuana company. What?
Yeah. Lamota. That's Lamota. That is the same one that at the time when she was moonlighting as a $9,000 a month consultant, that they also owed the Fed and the state several millions of dollars in back taxes. It's the same group that was going around and making political campaign donations to folks in brown paper bags. And
that's always legit.
Yeah. Well, and actually, and we'll get into this maybe in a second, they're back in the news today, and it has to do with one of the people that's running for re-election.
Would that be, would her first name start with a V?
Yeah, that's Val Hoyle.
So would this impeachment thing work for congressional people too, or just statewide?
No, just statewide officials. So, like, for instance, instead of just hoping that Shemia Fagan would go away or arrested and going to jail, they could have just impeached her and been done with her. But Shemia Fagan ran away, essentially.
And so now, if Oregonians approve this, they'll have a way of dealing with that, since there tends to be a little bit of Oh,
draft.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only other way to remove a state official is to recall them. And that, I mean, on a statewide level would be a huge lift.
Right.
And it's never been, as far as I know, and I've kind of looked to see if this has ever happened. As far as I know, a statewide official has never been recalled. Usually that's something that's done at the local level. Like if for a municipality, you want to get rid of a city council person or a county commissioner or something like that. But a statewide official, that's like
And
unheard of
and it seems difficult
here.
because you'd have so many people, and if you have an impeachment process, it would be the legislature. So, and
Mhm.
not to hit a lot of people. I'm not saying that people are bad, but a lot of people aren't really into politics and don't really know what it is. So somebody says, "Oh, she did this," they don't know. If you're in the legislature, those people are following this. You've got some steam there.
Right. And I mean, had it been in place, I'm positive, even though both houses of the legislature here in Oregon are Democratic majority, they wanted her gone,
Yeah.
and she would have been done. As would John Kitzhaber if he just had decided, I'm going to fight, I'm not going to go.
Right. Okay, so let's just
So
we
that's
can just skip
150.
we can skip around a lot, but let's get to Val Hoyle because that was the when I said there's
Okay.
one person I want to ask you about because she's running her seat's up and she's running again. Is that right?
Yeah, she is, she's a first time congresswoman as of this last term. This is the first time she's running for reelection as congresswoman for Congressional District 4. She is running against a woman by the name of Monique Despain,
I know Meg.
who who is, I mean, she was a former Air Force colonel. She was a JAG, so she was involved in the military justice system. When she retired, she came back to Oregon. She has been a practicing attorney and she specializes for the most part in victims' rights as a victims' rights advocate, and she is running against Val Hoyle. Well, today, so this whole thing with Val Hoyle and LaMotta has been going on for a while, about the campaign donations, about,
And this was when she was a state person, a state official, right?
yeah, and running essentially giving a $500,000 grant to a nonprofit group that Rosa Cesara and her partner in LaMotta had created for internships in the pod industry. And the staff at Boley had told Val Hoyle, this has all sorts of red flags. Don't do this. Hoyle sidestepped all of that and said, we're doing it anyways, gave them the $500,000. Val Hoyle runs for Congress. She wins. Boley goes back and says, no, this group is under investigation federally by a number of different people. We're going to claw that $500,000 back. So there's that. Then today, actually came out yesterday afternoon, that she is the subject now of a Federal Elections Commission complaint. And the allegation is that she unlawfully used campaign funds for personal use, in particular vacation and travel, which is a violation of federal election laws. And the complaint makes the claim based on campaign fund filings done by Hoyle's campaign that she used campaign funds to stay at a resort in Bar Harbor, Maine, which is known as a pretty upscale resort there,
I've been
just
there. It is. Hi.
just by Nova Scotia. So this is the actual second SEC or FEC complaint against Hoyle. And the first one was back in August of 2003, which was because she had received $5,700 in cash donations from LaMotta's founders, which exceeds the $100 federal legal cash limit. So it's not the first time that somebody has brought a complaint against Val Hoyle. Now, whether this sticks or not, just because you file a complaint doesn't mean you're guilty. But when you go back and you start taking a look at the filings, you can say they make a compelling claim.
But in a state like Oregon, is that because how many, I think people still, how many times have they voted for state and congressional people when they've done something? If it's a D, they still vote behind the D.
Yeah. I am really interested to see how this race turns out. I think there's a number of things about it that make it interesting. Number one, there has been no polling released on this particular race. Now, we know that the National Republican Congressional Committee stepped up to give Despain quite a bit of money and help in running her campaign. In this particular year, where the House in particular kind of hangs in the balance as far as who's going to control it, the Republicans have been very close to the vest on who they're going to give money to and who they aren't, because they want to back people that they think can flip seats.
Right.
So I would say that there's got to be some sort of internal polling that shows that Despain has a chance. The fact that none of the mainstream media, nor has Hoyle's side, released any information showing that she's ahead in the polling leads me to believe that it's tight. Because anytime a candidate can come out and say, well, our polling shows that, 58% of voters in that district are going to vote for candidate X, they're going to tout that.
Have they released any polling?
Nope. Neither one has.
Interesting.
And I've asked, and nobody has given up anything. And what's really another funny thing about this is that Willamette Week in Portland, which if you go through and look at their endorsements for candidates and everything else, while they're reporting, in particular, people like Nigel Jaquist for the Willamette Week are, they're equal opportunity. They don't care whether Democrat or Republican. If they come after you, they come after you.
Right. They're still journalists.
Right. What I found really interesting was in their endorsements, that particular district, District 4, they give absolutely zero endorsement or zero time on.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if that's simply because they believe that Portland is more of their target market and that people, down this way don't pay attention to it. But, there is no mention of that particular campaign. I am really interested in that one.
Yeah, no, that could be. And that's probably something a lot of people, well, in Oregon, Peter DeFazio had that seat for, 100 years. And then he basically, crowned Val, queen of that district, and she won. But maybe people, because of what's going on with Trump, and also with people, which Val's been kind of scrutinized in the news because of
a lot of different things.
Yeah,
and honestly, I don't know how connected she really is to that particular district. One of the ways that DeFazio hung on to that district, which at the time before redistricting was pretty much down the middle, his district in terms of R's versus D's. At least he was, and I give him a lot of credit for this, there is a big veterans community in the 4th Congressional District.
Yeah.
And he was a major proponent and supporter of veterans rights. And he, on a regular basis, because of just how screwed up the VA center was in Roseburg, he had no problems crawling up their butt when he recognized that things were wrong there at that particular VA. From what I have heard from people to the south, she doesn't really seem to have any name recognition to speak of with veterans.
Right.
So, that's an interesting,
Well,
a
and
really
Peter was
interesting
kind
case.
of, he was almost like the Bernie Sanders of Oregon, where, you know, I didn't agree with him on everything he thought, but he believed what he believed, and he believed it with intensity. And I think people respected that about him. He wasn't wishy-washy.
Oh
Um,
no.
he didn't get until the end, the last 10 years, maybe, then he became super partisan. I mean, he was always a Democrat, but then it was like, I remember going to a news conference one time, and he says, those, dumb Republicans are doing this, this, and this. And we were done with the press conference. And I walked up to him and I said, I know a dumb Republican that used to vote for you. And I said, the key is used to. And he just looked shocked because I was like, but that's when the name calling started. But I still respected the guy that he did stand up like Bernie. I don't agree with Bernie Sanders, but at least he doesn't change his position, and where he stands on something. And I'm not sure with what's going on with Val, that'd be who else is up for reelection, like that's interesting.
That would be the 6th congressional district.
That's the new
So
one, right?
that's no, the 6th. Do I have that right? No, the 5th, pardon me.
The fifth. Okay.
It's that's the incumbent is a Republican, which shocked everybody that she won,
Who is it?
which was Lori Chavez de Raymer.
Okay.
And so she's had the seat for the last 2 years. And Janelle Bynum, former state legislator, is
Know who that is.
running against her, Democrat. What's really interesting about that district was so badly gerrymandered. It used to mostly cover what I'll refer to as Central Oregon, east of the Cascades. And it was so rejiggered. It has areas of Salem and Clackamas County and the like, all the way over to and extending to Bend and other areas. Those areas have nothing in common with each other.
No. And for those people who don't know, when you redistrict, you're supposed to draw lines geographic, keep with county lines, and or have groups of people who have things in common with each other.
Right.
And that's what happened. That's why Oregon is really not as blue a state as it perceived to be. It's because the Democrats went in there and redrew those lines, especially Phil Kiesling. Not Phil Kiesling, excuse me. Phil Kiesling's a good guy. He fought that. Bill Bradbury, he's the one who did the most of it. And for instance, like I lived in Camp Creek, so I'm in the country. I'm with Cresswell, Cottage Grove, all these places, and then they redrew the lines and put the University of Oregon in there, which has nothing to do with country people or folks who vote in the country. So this happened all over the state, and this is the district that Bill's talking about. It's just people always say, "Oh, it's mail-in ballots," and there's a whole bunch of things, but redistricting is a huge problem in Oregon when they do it.
Very much so. And there's been a group that's tried a couple of times to get signatures to put an initiative on the ballot, people, not politicians, to change the way that redistricting takes place. And, part of it was they got hampered by COVID and just kind of some other internal stuff. What's interesting is on a smaller level in Lane County, there is would be a change to the state or to the county charter that would create a nonpartisan board for the commissioners' districts. So you've got East Lane and West Lane and Springfield and so on and so forth. And it would change the way that redistricting is done within the county in terms of the board seats.
Because I've seen some of that online. Isn't the claim there that Now you have bits and pieces of Eugene in Springfield. What used to be,
It's not bits and pieces. It's freaking South Eugene, which is as liberal
see,
and
that's what they
has
did to us.
nothing to do with Springfield as you can get.
So it used to be that Springfield was basically a district. You had the McKenzie Valley,
Yep.
you had West Eugene, you had downtown Eugene, and now what they've done is put little fingers into all those places so that it waters down the
Well,
vote so
what
that you're getting, is
okay,
that
they tried to do that, and when that was supposed to happen during redistricting, there was a whole bunch of different things that happened. But one of the things was that a couple of members of the redistricting committee, one of them was an actual campaign advisor for two sitting commissioners, and his wife, which they tried to keep secret and it finally came out, was also one of them. And he's the one that came up with the maps that would have added South Eugene to Springfield. Essentially, they came up with a map that every single one of the districts had chunks of Eugene in it. Now, East Lane County, we're talking Florence, okay? And you're telling me that, and Benita, you're telling me that you're going to include parts of Eugene and South Eugene into East Lane County?
that's
What the
West, you
hell
mean?
do they have to, or West? What the hell do they have to do with each other?
Right.
Nothing. So that was the impetus
It's,
for
you know, what's
20
so
232.
people need to pay attention more. I remember when this happened years ago with the Springfield School District. You had, you had I think every person on the board at that time, except for one, had a sister, a wife, or a direct relative who was a teacher, and then the other relative was on the board. And I was like, so I brought it up to one of the board members, and I said, I would love for my wife to be on the KEZI news staff and she gets to bargain my contract, but that isn't the reality of how life works. It's so unethical, but it's legal, but
Yeah,
it's
and,
so
and that's
unethical.
that's what's happening in Eugene 4J. um, where you have, former union leaders. One of them was a union negotiator that's part of the school board.
So,
So,
well, if people don't pay attention, then this is what you get. So what other things are on the ballot for you guys?
okay, so this one has really kind of flown under the radar. I mean, we've had, so 118, I'm sure you've talked about, which would create a corporate activities tax of 3% to give everybody $1,600 a year who has lived in Oregon for 9 months. Okay, I mean, I've done a number of stories, for
Yeah.
the news that I do for you. We've talked about that, completely funded from out of state. Actually, the guy that's putting in the most money is a former, Silicon Valley guy who's running for mayor in San Francisco. And they're trying to do it here in Oregon because they couldn't get it done in California and they want to get a foothold. There is no Oregon money that is involved in getting this passed here. And there was an article today that I caught, and I'm just going to paraphrase it because when the math was done on this, everybody in state government, including the unions, were saying, don't vote for this. The state already believes that it's going to cost them at least $1 billion to just administer this thing. And I mean, it's going to cause inflation, which we've already dealt with, and everybody else in the nation has. Um,
So this is
it's
something it's really bipartisan non-support. I mean,
oh yeah,
this is something that the governor and business people who aren't normally on her side or on each other's side, they're all coming out against this
yeah.
thing. But what do the polling show? I mean, Oregonians tend to pass feel-good bills that
Well,
sound good on paper.
again, very little polling on this, but let's be honest. If it comes down to it. Likely Portland will decide whether this passes or fails.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say was there is one that really has flown under the radar. It's ballot measure 116.
Okay.
And this establishes a salary commission for statewide elected officials, judges, legislators, and district attorneys. Now, it all sounds really good. It is an Oregon constitutional amendment. Okay, so this would amend the Constitution. And what it says is, well, you're going to have this independent group that's going to decide what these people's salaries are. And you look at that and go, okay, well, what it doesn't tell you is this independent commission will be chosen by legislators. The only exclusions are that you can't be a state employee, a lobbyist, or a family member of a legislator or state office holder. But you can be a donor, you can be a political consultant, you can be anybody you want to. There is no requirement that it be bipartisan or nonpartisan, and any decision they make is final. There are no hearings, nothing. There is no way to appeal it. One of the things that has kept those salaries from going up for state legislators and the like is the fact that they would have to vote their own raise, and that can be political suicide.
Yeah.
And that keeps them from doing it.
So this way they can blame somebody else.
Right. But of course, it's the legislature that chooses the air parentheses and little air parentheses again, independent commission. Also, follow the money. Every single state labor union is supporting this. From the teachers' unions to AFSCME, SEIU, Teamsters, you start going through this thing, and it's any union of any import that has anything to do with government is supporting this. And they're the ones that are also giving all of the financial support to it as well.
And then they'll go in and say, well, we don't have enough money in the budget. And, and that just continues to take money from Oregonians. It's just sick.
Okay. The other one is 117, which would implement ranked choice voting. Now, the way that works is you got 4 or 5 candidates, and you decide, okay, I like Rick. He's my favorite. And that Bill, he's kind of a dick. I don't like him, so he's number 5. But I kind of like Dr. Michael Bratland from Chris Dental, so he's number 2. And Matt from Newly Hyperbarics, he's number 4. And okay.
Let's take Scott Little. Let's put Scott Littlejohn in number 3.
Okay, and Scott Littlejohn's number 3 because he's
our insurance. Likable. Well, he is, and he's our insurance. So okay,
so he's all likable. All right, so everybody does their rankings, and then the person with the most number 1 ranks, if they get 50 plus 1, 50% plus 1 vote, would be the winner. But if they aren't, then they being the county clerks, knock whoever it is at the bottom out, who's the least popular.
You left.
And so I'm gone, hypothetically. Gone. And then they go through, okay, now what are the rankings? Now what are the rankings? Now what are the rankings? And they go through and keep rejiggering it. Well, let's say that, for instance, all the people that love Rick Dancer and voted for you,
thank you.
That they didn't rank anybody else.
What?
When they go, they didn't rank anybody else. They just said, damn it, I support Rick so much. He's my favorite. I would kiss his butt to the end of the earth, and I'm only going to rank him as number one and screw the rest of these guys. The second round of voting, you're gone.
Wow. Oh, is this what happened to Sarah Palin?
Oh, this is what's happened to a number of people. This actually has occurred up in Alaska.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Right. And the reason, and it's one of the reasons why Alaska is voting on November 5th, whether they're going to repeal it.
Huh.
Interesting to note, 117 is almost completely funded from out of state.
Now, Bill, I had Mark Frohnmeyer on when Eugene was looking at star voting, which he came up with. And the people that came in and fought that the most, the money, I think, was from those who support ranked voting. They were trying to kill the star voting because they wanted their voting system in there.
Well, star voting does away with some of, I mean, it's flawed too.
Right.
But it does away with the disenfranchisement of the vote, because I ranked Rick number one. He's my man. Yay, pat Rick on top of his well-coiffed head. But I didn't rank anybody else, so my vote, second round, I'm disenfranchised. My vote doesn't count anymore.
Huh. So is there any polling on this?
There's been very little polling on anything, with the exception of some of the congressional races, Congressional District 4 notwithstanding.
What's your sense with Oregonians?
I think it's going to pass for one simple reason. Portland passed ranked choice voting.
They did.
In
That's
the
right.
city.
Yeah, they did. They're doing that.
And it's going to be coming to Multnomah County, my understanding is next year. So if I had to guess, I bet it's gonna pass.
Huh? Because Oregonians have always been so leery. It's so funny. They're so liberal in a lot of ways, but when it comes to certain issues like opening the primary in Oregon, no, never, no, and it, all those things like that, and even changing the way we voted.
By mail.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's 117. So you talk to the people in Alaska, and I've had a number of folks from Alaska on to talk about how it worked up there. The things that 117 is supposed to cure, or ranked choice voting, is, well, it takes partisanship out of elections.
No, it doesn't.
It takes outside money out of elections. It moderates or creates more moderate candidates and more moderate winners for office. It also supposedly increases voting, that more people will vote, more people will actively vote, because we've opened it up and democratized it so much. Exactly the opposite on all of those things was the case in Alaska. Exactly the opposite. They're able to track the numbers of registered voters who voted. They're down about 24% since ranked choice voting started. Their campaigns up there have been much more negative, and they have been flooded with out-of-state money in campaigns in the state of Alaska. And they've had a couple of weird things happen where it's like everybody's like, how the hell did this person win? There's no way that they should have won.
Don't you think it's interesting that it's, Colorado is looking at, there's a bunch of money coming in for some measure down there, and I can't remember what it is. I was just talking to somebody from Colorado the other day. Here in Montana, we have three measures: 126, 27, 28 deals with voting and abortion, and both are funded completely from outside of Montana. Wouldn't you, as a citizen, and they are here in Montana, they are attacking these 126, 127, because we already have an open primary here, and they're saying we can open the primary. Well, when I went in to vote in the primary, they said, do you want a Democrat ballot, you want a Republican ballot, or do you want the independent ballot? And you can pick, but you have to only have one. but they want to change that. And if I'm a person and I think, why are out of state people investing money to change the way I vote? When what do they care about that for? If I was the Joe Public, I'd be like, nah, you don't get to do that.
It's all about control. Well, there was a time in Oregon where I wish I could remember his name. He was a former Oregonian and he moved to Arizona. And he funded a lot of ballot measures here in the state.
Was it
Ballot
Lauren
measures.
Parks?
Yes, Lauren Parks. Thank you. And one of the things that the Democrats would scream about is all of this out of state money coming in here to Oregon and funding these ballot measures. Well, now that they're Democratic issues and they're ones that Democrats want, 117 was put on the ballot, was referred to it by the Democrats in the legislature who run the Oregon legislature. They know when it's something they want out of state, oh, that's fine. And what, like, for instance, on 117, the funds from out of state are being funneled into the state into nonprofits. And the nonprofits are making the donation because they're a 501c.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have to say where their money is coming from. They don't have to file with the Secretary of State. They don't have to file with the Federal Elections Commission. They eventually will have to file tax forms to show where the money came from. But a newly created 501, and when the director of this nonprofit that's backing 117 has been asked by multiple different media agencies, who's funding you, all they'll say is other out-of-state nonprofits. They've dumped $3.7 million at last count.
At which one?
This one at 117. Wow. One nonprofit has dumped almost $4 million into it.
What nonprofit is it?
What is it? Greater Oregon, something like that. They're based out of Corvallis.
So in terms of national election, Oregon's going to be a blue state. Are you seeing, what do you see? I'm not there. So what do you see? Are people more tolerant of Trump than they were maybe 3 or 4 years ago? Or what do you see?
I don't think so. I mean, if you're a liberal, you're a liberal. All right. And I said this before. I don't think anybody, really was much on the fence around these here parts where Eugene being as liberal as it is, Corvallis, some other cities. I think, if you're a staunch R or a staunch D, you've known for quite a while who you're going to vote for.
Right.
And the folks that haven't made up their mind or are on the fence, they ain't talking.
Right.
They're not going to come out and say, well, I've been thinking about voting for that Trump guy, because they know they're going to get assailed.
Yeah.
I
have a friend who went to an appointment, and I'm going to be real sketchy about this, but the person found out that this friend was friends with me, and then in the appointment starts talking bad about my beliefs and stuff. And I thought, how and I would, and when I was in Oregon, I wouldn't, I wouldn't have been all out and talking, really boisterously. What people don't understand is when you have more conservative values, it doesn't make you better or worse than a liberal. But what happens in an area like Eugene, Springfield, and Oregon is you can't talk about it or people shun you and you lose business. And, I have people come on and they'll say, well, you got to be open to everything. And I go, no, actually you don't, you really don't. But living right where you are, you probably do. But it's kind of sad because, it's like what's happening with the Greater Idaho movement. You got a chunk of the state that wants out, and they want to relocate with Idaho. And those people, I had them on my show a couple months ago, and they've been trying to get Kotek to even talk to them, and she won't schedule a meeting with them. And don't you think if you were the governor of a state and you had a large chunk of the eastern branch of the state wanting to leave, that you'd have a meeting and say, what are we not doing? But they don't even care because they're not numbers enough and they don't matter to them in voting or any of that stuff. And that's really sad, I think, you know?
Yeah, it is. And she was asked, I don't know, I think it was a couple of months ago, she did one of her rare press conferences and somebody asked her about it. And she made it sound like, well, we're just having a really hard time, with scheduling. Like, you're the governor, you can make any damn schedule you want to.
Right.
Oh, you don't have any time at all in your life to
Because
go meet with some folks that have an issue?
wouldn't you feel like if you are the governor of the state of Oregon, that you should represent, I mean, a Mark Hatfield or a Tom McCall, they would have been out there,
Absolutely.
had their people listening to them and find out what they're doing. And there's none of that, and it's like, and I think that's when when you have a one party state, it gets really,
Well, because at that point, you're no longer the governor of the state of Oregon, you're the Democratic governor
yeah.
of the state of Oregon. You're representing Democrats. You're not representing all Oregonians, which, incidentally, it should be noted, Democrats are not necessarily in the majority in Oregon. There
No.
are more unaffiliated and
Yep.
independent voters in Oregon than there are registered Democrats or registered Republicans.
And people don't know that. I say this all the time on my shows and stuff, and they don't know that. They think that the Democrats run it, but really, but the problem with the non-affiliated voters, which I was for many years, but I'm not. I mean, I was very active, but I think a lot of those people, because of Kate Brown and her voter motor bullshit, they got signed up to vote whether they wanted to or not. So they're not people who really even, and not all of them, but there's a chunk of them that they didn't want to vote. They had to sign up because they got a driver's license. So they had to sign up.
Yeah,
But they
or they
don't
were from
really,
another country.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so do you guys, here's a question because I can't remember. Do you have to show ID to vote?
No,
I thought not.
It's mail in.
I know, but when you originally registered, did we have to? I can't remember.
Originally, oh man, I mean, I registered to vote when I was 18.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, I went down, I registered to vote, I got my card that I had to sign, and then I kept it in my wallet. And you would go to your polling place and show your card,
We
and the
still
little
do
old
that here.
lady, would
Yep.
give you a cookie, and and she usually wore Chanel number 5, and you would go into the booth, and you would vote, and you'd talk to your neighbors, and everybody, would do the voting thing. No, in Oregon, you don't have to prove anything. You get a ballot.
Isn't that the weirdest thing? Well, yeah, and look at all the illegal voters you guys had on the. I saw the news stories. How many people you had that are on the register who are not supposed to be on the register?
Right. Well, that's okay. So if we're going to get into the voting, so there's all sorts of things that are going on with the vote here in Oregon. If you didn't hear, well, part of this is in Washington, but
Oh, I heard about the ballot boxes. Yeah. Who
Yeah.
hasn't? Good God.
Okay.
You guys are like a top story on every program that's out there is going, they burn 2 boxes elected ballots in 2 boxes, one in Portland and one in Vancouver.
Right. And the New York Times reported today that those ballots were also tagged with Free Gaza.
I saw that.
Now, the FBI, who's obviously in the U.S. Attorney's Office, they're seeing if this was, a pro-Palestinian group or somebody that's just trying to foment discontent. They're not sure. You have that. Then, literally, the day that happened, in Lane County, the sheriff's office came out and told people who live in Marcola to, number one, don't use the U.S. post office boxes in Marcola because somebody had broken into the post office and stolen the mailbox keys,
Oh
and
my.
apparently broke into them over the weekend and were telling people, if you dropped your ballots into those boxes, you need to check, you know, My Vote Oregon to make sure to see if your ballot's been counted. There's that. Then we're finding out in Coos County that uh, at this point, estimated at least several hundred people haven't received their ballots yet because they weren't delivered by the post office. So when they rejiggered districts, and remember, this became a big deal about the U.S. Postal Service, how,
Uh-huh.
the former director, and they were doing these different hubs and stuff. So all the ballots from Coos County came to Springfield, and then they were supposedly sent out from Springfield, but they've never arrived. And the Secretary of State and the county clerk for Coos County, which for folks that don't know is over on the coast, part of the Coast Range, a little bit east of the Coast Range, but it's, along the Oregon coast, sort of central southern Oregon coast. They said today, the county clerk there did, that if you haven't received your ballot, you ain't going to get it. You need to come down to the clerk's office and get a new ballot. The post office, the Secretary of State has demanded that the post office tell them what happened. The county clerk for Coos County is demanding it. And the U.S. Post Office absolutely refuses to comment on what happened to those ballots. And furthermore, it's not the first time it happened. It happened back in May, although not on this scale.
So many people believe, and especially I think since the last, when COVID, when there was so much mail-in balloting in the rest of the state, because weren't we the first people to do vote-in mail-in votes?
Yeah,
I think we're the first one.
Yeah, it started in Lynn County. Gray, I think his last name was Druckenmiller. I want to say his first name
Oh
was
yeah,
Greg.
no, I remember him. Yeah,
Yeah, he was the one that started it.
I think it's a really bad idea, and I used to like it, but I think now after being away,
Steve
it's like it's just,
Druckenmiller.
huh?
Steve
Druckenmiller.
Druckenmiller.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I
Well,
think
he's
it's
dead.
well, but he was a great guy.
Yeah. Okay.
But with a bad idea. It was a good idea, but now it just isn't working because people cheat so much. But it's like it's just open to fraud, and people in other parts of the country, like here now, because of COVID, you can get an absentee ballot and do that. But like when I went in to vote early, I go into the courthouse, they make me show ID, they give me a ballot, and then they have little booths set up in the hallway in the courthouse, and you go out there and you do your little thing. But I just think it's if we want fair voting, which I think no, I don't think most of us do. I think a lot of us do. How do you have fair voting if the post office can't get things straight? If people can go to ballot boxes, that ballot is priceless, and people need to treat it that way. And we don't. We just act like it's no big deal. I mean, I used to always take mine and hand deliver it because I was afraid of putting it in the post box. That somebody see it and go, oh, that's Rick Dancer. He must be voting this way,
Well, and here's the thing. If you've got a county clerk that's sending out a bulk mailing of ballots and they can't get to where they're supposed to be going, what's to ensure that you walking down with your ballot and putting it in a post box, a U.S. Postal Service mailbox, what's to ensure it's even going to arrive?
Right. So if
it works both ways.
Because, and I think what's so stupid about the whole thing is the whole reason used to be that we want as many people to vote as we can, get them, got to make it as easy as possible. To me, if you don't want to vote, please don't. And if you're not an educated voter and you don't want to bother to look other than at the stupid voters pamphlet, which is just a bunch of paid advertising, then don't vote. I don't think you need to vote. We need educated people who'd really look into these things before we vote. Otherwise, we end up with these ballot measures that are so stupid, like Measure 110, because they go, oh, but they said that more people will go to counseling and do this, and it's like, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Also, the state of Oregon Judicial Watch has filed a suit in regards to Oregon's voter rolls because we don't clear them. And the state, the Secretary of State's office likes to say, well, they don't understand the law. Because if people don't vote for 2 elections in a row, they go into the inactive
Inactive
file.
file.
And we don't send them ballots after that unless they ask for them. And this is how we can, control these ballots. If someone dies, somebody moves out of state, because you move out of state, last thing that you're thinking about is, oh, I better let the, elections division know that I'm moving to another state. Who does that?
No.
So instead of clearing them, they just say, oh, they're inactive. Well, it's not true. I have the photograph of the ballot that was sent to a chiropractor. His name is Shane, and he sent me a photograph of the ballot. And it's addressed to his dad. And it just came here a couple of weeks ago. His dad died in 2018. In 2018. I mean, I've got the photograph of the ballot.
Right.
And they've contacted the county clerk. Okay. The state would like to say, oh, well, we're constantly checking vital records. And if somebody dies, well, we check that with our voter rolls and we make sure they're removed. No, they aren't. Once I talked about that on the air, I got swamped with emails and photographs of ballots for dead people.
Bill, I've had 3 people write me from other states that moved 2, 3, 4 years ago, and they're still getting Oregon ballots. And they have notified them and said, we don't live there anymore. We're voting in Georgia. And of course, these people didn't vote, but they could have voted and sent that back, and nobody probably would have known the difference. And these people notify. I mean, after they got the first ballot, all of them said they notified them. And then they kept coming. And she says, and here again, the lady I talked to, it's here again. I just got the Oregon presidential ballot. And she says, and I haven't lived there for 3 years. And I've told them. I mean,
I have
that's
a feeling. I honestly have a feeling. I mean, and you're seeing other suits like this.
Yeah.
Virginia, the judge said, oh, well, you improperly registered non-citizens to vote. Well, they get to vote anyway.
Right.
In Pennsylvania, there was a suit that had to do with provisional ballots that, the folks that were against the provisional ballots and the way they went about dispersing the provisional ballots, they're kicking it to the Supreme Court, as is the case from Virginia. If you think that 2020 and the vote was litigated,
yeah, you wait.
You wait. I mean, it's starting the groundwork. I mean, the vote hasn't even taken place yet, and it's being litigated.
Yeah.
You watch. It is going to be it's going to be a target-rich and job-secure environment for attorneys across the country that want to get involved in litigating the vote.
And what's so interesting, Bill, I always want to make this point, is I love how when Trump didn't accept the election results in his own mind, he was saying I was rigged, and how the Democrats picked on him. And it's like, but when you go back and I looked at history, Gore, Clinton, Hillary, I mean, all the Democrats always challenge the vote if they lose. And people don't look at that. All they look at is one man. And it's like, it's absolutely amazing. And I had a caller the other day say, do you notice that everything they blame Trump or Republicans for, they've already done? I said, yeah, it's kind of like human nature,
A little projection for sure.
Yeah. So, Bill, how do people find, for the next few days, watching you, listening to you on election night? Are you guys going to do anything? Where should people go if they want to get local results from Oregon?
There's no reason to listen and look at local results. You want me to tell you why?
I do. That's why there was a major pause there.
Yeah, because early results are meaningless now.
Yeah, true.
And the reason that they're meaningless is, okay, with mail-in voting, it used to be you had to have that ballot in
Yep, by 8
either
o'clock.
in a ballot box or by mail by 8 p.m. on election night. Now, the way that it's set up, it has to be postmarked by 8 p.m. election night. And after that, the ballots can continue to come in for a week, for 1 week. Compounding all of that is that certain areas, Corvallis, Benton County, not Multnomah County, but Portland, are doing ranked choice voting, which takes a lot longer. The Secretary of State's office just yesterday said that, I'll read the story. I've got it right here. While preliminary election results will become available at 8 p.m. on election day, the Secretary of State's office says voters need to expect to wait days for the outcomes of closely watched races. The delay, among other things, stems from a trend now with Oregon voters waiting until election day to drop their ballots in the mail.
Bill,
The law changed in 2021, allowing people to wait until the last minute. They also believe because of Portland now using ranked choice voting, that's going to add more time to the process.
and they wonder why we have a generation of kids who don't understand deadlines. I mean, here in Montana, it's 8 o'clock. And if you're in line to vote, you know, they said if you're in line, they'll let you vote. But 8 o'clock is the cutoff time.
Yeah.
And we can vote up till, I mean, early voting up until election day here. So
you know,
it is doable, and people should.
I thought about it. It's like, what are we going to do on election night? I'm like, what's the point?
Right, exactly.
What is the point?
Bill Lundun, I got to get this in under an hour, and you and I could go for 3, or it won't fit on some of the platforms I put it on. So thank you so much for your help and what you do. And
thanks, Rick.
We'll check in with you, and hopefully your newscast next week after the election will be full of obscure things that we won't be able to even know what happened.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it will be. Hey, man,
right.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
You're welcome. I'll see you later, Bill. Okay, so there again, you guys, if you are Oregon, wherever, vote early. You guys can't. You have your mail-in ballots, but for Montana people and others that are watching around the country, get out there and vote early. It really does matter. And we want to thank our sponsors. And I'm going to finish this up so we can get this out there. All right, see you later. Have a good evening. Good night.